clear intervals overnight. That just allowing temperatures to drop down into single figures for most of us, but a patchy frost is possible in some rural areas across the northern half of the UK. Whilst it will be quite cool to start off Bank Holiday Monday, it also means it's going to be fairly bright and sunny, and we'll hold on to a good amount of those sunny intervals throughout the day as well. It's going to be the far north of Scotland into Orkney, Shetland, where we have a bit more persistent cloud throughout the day. The odd spot of drizzle is possible, but it'll be dry elsewhere. The easterly breeze just making things feel quite cool along some eastern coastal areas, but generally further west, you'll see temperatures climbing towards that 20 degrees Celsius again and feeling pleasantly warm. Into the overnight period, it is also going to stay fine and dry for the vast majority. Again, a good number of clear intervals, so patchy frost possible once again, the odd mist and fog patch forming, and that breeze in the east is going to start dragging in a bit more cloud across locations here, and that could make it quite murky first thing on Tuesday morning. Some of that cloud quite stubborn to clear, but generally as you move further west, there'll be a good amount of sunshine throughout the day as well. So, as we said, that high-pressure system is staying with us throughout the forthcoming week. It's going to bring us a continued repeat pattern, though, because that easterly breeze will continue to feed in cloud along coastal areas here. So feeling much cooler and along those areas, but further west we'll always see the highest of the temperatures. Bye-bye.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan tonight. A very busy show for you. In my big opinion, Labour wants to get rid of gas and oil licences in the North Sea. 5 years of Starmer would leave us poorer, colder and more reliant on foreign imports. If Labour get in, I'd advise you to invest in a duffel coat. In the big story, as the first former This Morning employee speaks out, should ITV axe the show? I'll get the views of former top daytime TV presenter and GBNews star Esther McVeigh. My Mark Meets guest is one of the most fearless and principled politicians in the country, the Brexit-supporting Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood in West Yorkshire, Andrea Jenkins. So in my big opinion, I'm dealing with Keir Starmer. In my Take a 10, I'll be dealing with ITV and the This Morning debacle. A busy 2 hours to come. Lots to debate, but after all, it is Sunday night. It's a bank holiday weekend, so let's have some fun along the way. Put something cold and fizzy in the fridge or fire up the kettle and let's make a night of it. Let's start with the headlines and Rory Smith.
Thank you very much, Mark. ITV says This Morning will air tomorrow, following reports the show could be axed. But staff members say executives need to prove they're properly addressing the issue of Philip Schofield's affair with a young employee. Sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save the programme. We asked some viewers their opinions.
It's not really for us to judge someone. I mean, what he did, if it's true that this young chap was 18, it's nothing to do with us. I think he should speak to his family.
I will say that I think perhaps the show needs fresh people on. I think that the show really relied on the chemistry that Holly and Phil had.
For me, I'm less keen to watching the programs with them. As they split, I'm all right, and I think that Holly's gonna get the career even bigger now, you know.
I like Phil and Holly, so I'm very sad to see them go, because I love them both. So it's a pity, really. And I was shocked to hear about Phil, because I didn't think he'd do anything like that, be so deceitful.
In Turkey, President Erdogan has won the presidential elections to take his rule into a third decade. Erdogan received just over 52% of the vote, with Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu securing nearly 48%. His rival is refusing to admit defeat, calling it an unfair election. French President Emmanuel Macron and Russia's Vladimir Putin have both congratulated the leader on his re-election. A 5-year-old girl has died following a house fire in Pembrokeshire. Despite the efforts of emergency services, Alicia Salisbury passed away at the scene of the blaze in the Ponte Glacier area last night. Her family, who described her as a beautiful daughter and sister, are being supported by specialist officers. The force says it's working to establish the cause. The government is launching an ad campaign to stop people from crossing the channel. The advert, set to be circulated in Albania next week, will warn people they face being detained and removed if they make the journey. While critics have already branded it as pointless, saying it won't deter them. A record number of people made the crossing in small boats last year, and more than 6,000 have been intercepted so far this year. Supermarkets could be asked to introduce a price cap on basic food to help struggling households. The government is reportedly drawing up plans suggesting the move, but a Treasury source told the Sunday Telegraph it would be voluntary. The scheme would see retailers charging the lowest possible amount for products like bread and milk, while food prices, which are expected to keep rising, have increased by 19.1% in the year to March. TV, online, DAB+ radio and in TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, back to Mark.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, Labour wants to get rid of gas and oil licences in the North Sea. 5 years of Starmer would leave us poorer, colder and reliant on foreign imports. If Labour get in, I'd advise you to invest in a duffel coat. The future of This Morning is also the topic of tonight's big story. I'll get the views of former top daytime TV presenter and GB News star Esther McVey. My Mark Meets guest is one of the most fearless and principled politicians in the country, the Brexit-supporting Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood in West Yorkshire, Andrea Jenkins. And as Keir Starmer says he has a plan to tackle the Channel migrant crisis, can Labour stop the boats? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable Anne Widdecombe. In my Take at 10, ITV are expected to axe This Morning by the autumn. This sorry drama is one of their own making. 2 weeks ago, I broke the internet with my extraordinary offer to step in and rescue the show. After 10, find out whether that offer still stands. Mark Dolan tonight is the home of the papers with tomorrow's front pages at exactly 10:30. With 3 top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight, Hilary Freeman, John Sargent and Linda Jubilee. Tonight I'll be asking the pundits, should Rishi Sunak cap food prices? Is it acceptable to shout F the Tories? And should under-16s always be accompanied by an adult in a shopping centre? Plus your emails, especially the spicy ones, mark@gbnews.com. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Happy bank holiday weekend to one and all. We're going to have some debates, we're going to have a laugh, and we're going to have some entertainment along the way. As it's Sunday and you don't have work tomorrow, most of you, why don't you fire up the kettle, get a brew going, or put something cold and fizzy in the fridge, and let's have a night to remember. Big news, folks. As reported in today's Sunday Times newspaper, Sir Keir Starmer, the cervix-free leader of the opposition, will announce plans to block all new North Sea oil and gas developments and limit borrowing to green investment only as part of a radical blueprint to make Britain, and I quote, a clean energy superpower. Plus, he wants to create a terrifying 1970s-style state-funded company, gambling taxpayers' billions on flaky renewables. Now, Germany took this route over a decade ago under the leadership of the disastrous Angela Merkel, the most overrated politician in European history. It was the Green Party in Germany, upon whose votes and support Merkel was so reliant, who took Germany down the bizarre path of ditching all nuclear energy and investing tens of billions in wind and solar. The end result? A country lacking energy independence, suffering crippling energy costs to industry, and don't forget, the Germans make a lot of stuff, and a shocking over-reliance on Vladimir Putin to keep the lights on. Don't forget, it was in 2019 that Donald Trump warned Germany that they were overly dependent on Russian oil and gas. But he's a bad person, and we shouldn't listen to him. We should listen to ideological green zealots whose policies in Germany have plunged that country into a recession that we avoided. And now, wait for it, the Germans are opening new coal mines. Yes, the filthiest form of energy that you can find. Quite the turnaround. Blindly pushing for net zero, irrespective of the consequences on ordinary people, is pure politics, and will leave factories bankrupted by energy costs and ordinary people shivering at home. The message is clear: go woke, no smoke. Ironically, our record on the environment in the UK is a good one. In the last 2 decades, carbon emissions in Britain have fallen by 43%. And we are responsible for just over 1% of global emissions. Not bad for the 5th biggest economy in the world. There's always more to do, and I'm all for getting carbon emissions down. And who doesn't want cheap, reliable, renewable energy and cleaner air? Green energy is a potential money spinner for us. We are world leaders in green tech, and countless jobs are up for grabs, so bring it on. But I hate to be so balanced about this. But I'm thinking what might be best is an energy mix. I know it sounds controversial. Long-term investment in nuclear, solar, wind and tidal power along the way, and a bit of oil and gas to fall back on. Always keeping the option to drill, baby, drill open when faced with a monster like Putin. How about that? What do you think? Under Labour's plan, which in my view is purely driven by a desire to win votes in places like Scotland, where thousands have joined the climate cult, we risk permanently high energy prices and a reliance on unscrupulous regimes like Saudi Arabia and Russia to fill the gap. Plus, the madness of us buying shale gas from the Americans, which we've just signed up to do. The world clearly needs to wean itself off fossil fuels. But perhaps we could allow China, India, Brazil, Russia and the United States to make some progress with their eye-watering emissions before we bankrupt ourselves by showing so-called leadership on this issue. We must have scrutiny when it comes to the so-called climate emergency. Look, it might be emergency, it might not be emergency. But unlike COVID, let's debate it. Let's hear from all voices, including those who challenge the narrative. If I hear the expression, the science is settled one more time, I will throw up. And let's make sure that policies which impact the people are done with the consent of the people, as we are the ones who will pay the price if the pursuit of net zero proves fruitless and ruinously expensive. We need to clean up the planet and get emissions down, but not by clobbering business, wrecking the economy and curtailing the quality of life of the British people. I happen to think the windfall taxes on oil and gas companies was a terrible mistake, given that we're seeking to partner with those businesses in investing in renewables. We either want their help or we don't. Understandably, they're now taking their billions elsewhere. And of course, we saw those numpties just stop oil at a major rugby match yesterday, causing more havoc. By risking lives, blocking roads and causing disruption, these chancers are losing the argument and losing the support of the great British public, many of whom are bringing the law into their own hands. Keir Starmer probably has quiet admiration for Just Stop Oil. Well, they're his type, aren't they? Middle-class, Islington-dwelling champagne socialists. But what is their utopia, the people that Gary Lineker thinks are heroes? Well, Just Stop Oil want you to have no car, no international flights for ordinary people, no central heating, no meat. You can't live in a big house or have a spare room. Eco-extremism is an ideology, a religion and a cult. Honestly, they are such cults. And it comes from the same so-called science which claims a man can become a woman. If we're not careful, future governments will be deciding how many cups of tea we can have a day based upon our carbon allowance. A sensible and integrated approach to cleaning up the planet is welcome. But blindly pursuing net zero with no debate or scrutiny threatens to hasten the decline of the West and therefore poses an existential threat to the free world, and no one voted for that. Forget about Just Stop Oil, just stop Starmer. Brilliant stuff. Well, look, what is your reaction? Greg, give me a little bit of a scroll if you don't mind. The email address is a brand new one, and it is mark@gbnews.ucom. What is your view? Now, Keir Starmer would argue that the rate of climate change is unsustainable, and the cost of future natural disasters far outweighs any investment we make now. As Prime Minister, Starmer wants to show leadership in this field so that Britain can be a global beacon as a low-carbon, successful green economy. He'd argue he's the only politician offering a bright and sustainable future for both the country and the planet. That's not my view, but that is his. What do you think? mark@gbnews.com. Let's get the views now of my top pundits tonight. Author and agony aunt, Hilary Freeman. Top journalist, the BBC's former chief political correspondent, TV news legend John Sargent. And speaking of legends, journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee. Linda, can I just say you're too young to be a legend?
Oh, thank you so much.
At least 2 more decades.
I don't know that you're right, though.
Whilst I've got your attention, your reaction to the news that essentially Keir Starmer wants to prevent us exploring new oil and gas fields for the future?
Well, it kind of says that, but as usual, he only gives you the top line. He doesn't underpin what he said with anything else. And I think that's becoming a trademark of Keir Starmer's. He launches into phrases, but he doesn't underpin them with proper data, proper information. So we don't know what the strength of this comment really is. I suspect that there is a political imperative, obviously, here. Both political parties want to get younger viewers, and everybody knows that Gen Z, millennials, they're all concerned about the climate change. They want to scoop up those voters, and I think that Keir Starmer has that front of mind.
Indeed, and I think we might not realise just how popular the eco message is up in Scotland, and Labour see their path to power back to number 10 as via Scottish votes. So, which is astonishing, John, because it's the Scottish economy, if it were to be independent, that would be so reliant on North Sea reserves.
Sure, but you're thinking logic, aren't you?
Big mistake.
No, that's the problem about these things. People are worried about climate change, particularly not so much about the heating, but about the sudden change in the climate. Where you get these incredible floods and people beginning to realise, wait a moment, did not happen like this before. And I think that is pressing on people's minds. So if you give them a simple slogan, just stop oil, right, that's it. Particularly for younger people trying to grapple with some of these problems which cannot be grappable. They're not like that. They're very complicated. They involve people working in all sorts of different directions to achieve these results. But the immensity of the problem is so much, it's swept away with a slogan. Of course, that's so attractive for people.
It is. It's a persuasive message. However, I think we've got to do this sensibly. And I would say, Hilary, economy first.
Yeah, well, yes, but that's not going to, as you say, get the voters. And I think, you say the slogans. Yes, it is just a slogan, but everything's slogans now. All of politics is slogans. Everything's headlines, isn't it? And I think
get Brexit done, stop the votes.
Exactly. That's what ultimately it doesn't really matter what the slogan is. I think people do care about the environment now, and we have to do something because it is a pressing issue, and Labour's got to differentiate themselves from the Tories.
OK, your reaction, Mark at gbnews.uk. Coming up next in The Big Story, should ITV axe this morning? I'll see you in 3.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Bill, on the subject of my big opinion, Just Stop Keir is the subject heading on his email. Good evening, Bill. How are you? Mark at gbnews.com. Hi, Mark. We have to be self-reliant and therefore our oil and gas reserves must be utilised. If we rely on these Greens and Starmer, we will all be living in caves. Thank you for that. Keep those emails coming. And now let's get back to ITV and This Morning. It is time for the big story, and that is the only story in town. And amid growing unrest among presenters and crew on the show over the channel's handling of the Philip Schofield crisis, is it inevitable that the show will get the axe? What could the long-term damage to ITV's reputation be? And where does Holly Willoughby go from here? Is she forever tainted by this scandal? My next guest is perfectly qualified to answer all of these questions as someone who has worked in corporate governance and brand management, as well as having been a major star in daytime TV. Conservative MP and GB News presenter Esther McVey. Hi, Esther.
Hello there, Mark.
Great to see you back on the box where you belong. Esther, is the axe inevitable now for this show?
Well, I don't say anything's inevitable just yet, but I have to say this drip, drip, drip of information is disastrous. You were talking about reputation there. You're talking about who is going to feel the pain from what happens next. So what they have to do, because ITV now has become the story, This Morning has become the story, they've got to get ahead of the curve, something they haven't done. So what people are saying to me, there's no clarity there. What actually is the story? What did Phil Schofield do wrong? Everybody keeps saying it was legal. Who did know whatever happened? And they need to get clarity, get ahead of the story and start explaining what goes on. Because what we're seeing at the moment is the fallout. And the fallout will be the viewing figures, which have dropped from about 1.3 million, they're down at 700,000, came back a little bit. That might be sort of ghoulishness, wanting to know what's going on. So you had viewing figure fallout, you'll have shareholder fallout, you'll have advertisers fallout. And obviously what you're seeing now is guests wondering, well, do they want to be associated with this? You're seeing contributors questioning things, saying toxic environments. So they will have to be forensic. They're going to have to be dispassionate in a way and get to the bottom of what's gone on. And that they haven't done so far.
Well, yes, let's not forget that Rupert Murdoch axed the News of the World, a very valuable brand, because of phone hacking. Perhaps the Schofield story is not on the same scale, but it is damaging. Schofield clearly toast now, Esther, but what about Willoughby?
Well, people will want to know who knew what, who was covering up what, who turned a blind eye to what. Now, at the moment, Philip Schofield's helped them all, hasn't he, by saying he was deceitful. He led them all astray. But the question will be, really, would a reasonable person have known what was going on and asked questions? And you've even heard our own GB News Dan Wootton saying he was asking questions back in 2019. Other people were, and that's where this toxic environment, you mentioned something and you seem to have been shuffled out. And what people need to remember, and obviously, yes, I was in brand management and corporate governance, but I was in politics too. And what they do is, if there is a story, you'll be called in and they'll say, what did you know? What honestly did you know? We need to know about what's on your phone, because there's videos now, there's WhatsApps now, there's photographs now. What we don't want to see in a few months' time is more information coming out. So you have to level with us. I think that's maybe why Philip Schofield's management company left him, because he didn't level with the story maybe 3 years ago. And that's what ITV isn't doing. And the longer it goes on, this sort of cross-contamination, it won't stop just at this morning. It will move across to the brand. And that is where you will see other people having to go, and possibly this morning going because they didn't nip it in the bud straight enough and they didn't get to the facts quick enough. And as you mentioned, News of the World, maybe Murdoch was too quick there, but he didn't want that contamination to the rest of his empire.
I think you're right. I think it was a hasty decision on his part, and one that perhaps he regrets. Let me warn you, Esther, loaded question incoming. Do you believe Holly Willoughby when she says she knew nothing and knows nothing of this situation?
Oh, look, I think that's a tough one. I wouldn't want to call anybody, because what you're saying there, if I don't believe her, I'm calling her a liar. Well, I'm not saying that at all. But I guess the legal question would be, was it reasonable not to have known? Maybe, could you have been more curious? But those aren't for me. That will be for her, her agency, ITV, to question her about. Now, she's off air for a period of time now, and I guess she'll be going through all that. And she'll probably have to herself question, well, what did I know? And I guess that's what she's doing.
Yes, well, look, a very diplomatic answer, as expected, Esther. Let me give you a statement from former This Morning star Ranj Singh, who spoke out today. He said, over time, I grew increasingly worried about things behind the scenes and how people, including myself, were being treated. I didn't know the truth about what was going on with Philip, but I do know the issues with This Morning go far beyond him. I felt like because I whistle blew, I was managed out. But as history and experience have taught us, things like bullying and discrimination are very hard to prove, particularly in hindsight. And when the people in power control the narrative, as we've seen, no review or investigation is foolproof. Now, Esther, you have been an expert in brand management and brand recovery when there's a scandal going on. What about the damage to ITV long term?
Well, I think what Ranj said there is damaging, isn't it? Because he is saying there was a culture there above and beyond that he couldn't get to the bottom to, and things were overlooked. And this is what I talked about, the drip, drip. Other people are coming forward with other stories, and they've got to get ahead of that. And that will mean, who did he go to who didn't provide that support? Why wasn't that support provided? And that could go right up the ranks. So this is why I'm saying it's gone on now for a considerably long period of time. You know what they say about politicians? If you're making the news for 7 days, you've invariably gone. Well, ITV need to look at this as well, and all of those responsible, and what sort of environment have they got for people to come forward, whistleblowers and others? Do people feel confident there? Is there a proper protection of people who work there? And that's what they'll be looking at, really.
I think they're missing you in the boardroom, Esther. Yeah, I think they're missing your wisdom in that boardroom. I think there are grave concerns about the quality of leadership at the top, notwithstanding Schofield's behaviour. Now, here on GB News, you work with a Philip as well, don't you? But you got a good one.
Yes, his surname's Davis, Philip Davis, my husband. What can I tell you? I can only tell you good things about him. But I have got incriminating evidence, WhatsApp messages and photos.
Well, exactly right. I mean, you could take him down all the way. What I love about your show is that it's real. Obviously, you have chemistry because you love the guy and he's your husband. But do you see a contrast now between the kind of shows that we try to do on GB News, where what you see is what you get, there's no BS, there's no smoke and mirrors, versus a lot of establishment media programmes like This Morning, where Holly and Phil went on air 2 weeks ago and pretended like nothing had happened?
Well, you see, authenticity is key. And I think the viewers can sniff that a mile off. Hence, you saw the viewing figures going down, down, down. It's like they could sense what was going on, the friction or what have you. Sometimes friction's good and people will watch for a little bit longer. But no, what we do have, is that authenticity. And equally, we say everything in a way is fair game. We're happy to talk about everything and all sides of an argument. And I think that is the future of TV, because like I say, you can be caught out in too many different ways, can't you? Photos, videos, chat, what other people knew, which is sort of what's rumbling out here.
Well, look, Esther, thank you so much for giving up your valuable time on a Sunday night to join us. Esther and Phil have a massive army of fans on their show every Friday and Saturday, 10 till 12 in the morning. Check it out. It's brilliant stuff.
Can I say one thing? We go to bed with you. We listen to you.
Is it a three-way relationship?
It is, as you do the newspaper headlines, yes.
Well, listen, I'm happy to share a bed with both of you anytime. Well, that's a great privilege, a great honour. My thanks to the brilliant Esther McVeigh. Esther and Phil back on Friday at 10. Thank you, Esther. Coming up next with the pundits, should Rishi Sunak cap food prices? Is it acceptable to shout F the Tories? And should under-16s always be accompanied by an adult in a shopping centre? All of that next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, The People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Well, picking up on the Holly Willoughby debate, we've been asking you online, do you believe Holly Willoughby when she said that she knew nothing of Schofield's behaviour? And I think we might have the results of that now ready to go. But it's 88%. 88% say no, they don't believe her. 12% say yes. We'll just show you that graphic in a moment. Whilst we're getting that up and running, the subject of my big opinion was Sir Keir Starmer, who wants to get rid of gas and oil licences for future explorations, which I think will expose us to monsters like Putin in a future energy emergency. Clive says, Mark, you can take the so-called climate emergency and net zero and stick it where the sun doesn't shine, along with the rest of the left-wing arseholes who can get stuffed. Blimey, strong views there. I'll never stop riding my motorcycles, drinking and smoking. Well, Clive, I've got to say, you do sound like good company. Mark at gbnews.uk. Keir Starmer, Ian says, hi, Mark, I really don't understand why your pundits think there is a climate crisis. There's no evidence that there is. In fact, the number of lives lost to flooding and other extreme weather events is lower now than it ever has been. The Earth is cooler now than it was 10,000 years ago. This climate change nonsense is purely political and without scientific evidence. Look, as I mentioned in my big opinion earlier, there are lots of views, and I just don't want to make the same mistake as the pandemic, where we say the science is settled, where there's one narrative. Let's hear from all voices. Keep yours coming, mark at gbnews.com, and here are the results of that poll. It's an explosive question. I've got to say the team and I deliberated whether we should be asking, but I think it's what people are talking about down the pub. Do you believe Holly Willoughby? The vast majority of the British public do not. 87.9%, no, I don't. 12.1%, yes, I do. So, reacting to the big stories of the day, my top pundits tonight, Hilary Freeman, John Sargent and Linda Jubilee. Now, the government is discussing plans for supermarkets to introduce a cap on basic food items. Major retailers could see a reduction in prices for items such as bread and milk in a bid to tackle the cost of living crisis. So, should Sunak cap food prices? Linda?
No. Now, it's not that I don't have a great deal of sympathy for people who are really suffering because of the price squeeze. I do. Inflation like this is a pernicious thing and it's very, very destructive. Sometimes I think it's a bit like a boa constrictor, and the more you try and wriggle, the tighter it gets. It gets a grip and it won't go away. But the fact of the matter is, if you intervene in this way and you start to destroy free market economics, there's always a problem. Once you hit at supply and demand, you've always got a problem. You risk job losses at supermarkets, you risk, for example, harming the farmers, you risk investment, you risk all sorts of medium, long-term entrenched problems by putting a cap on food prices. And then you've got the actual logistical position of how you would make it work. For example, what would the key products be? What would you do when you've got something like eggs, when there's just a vast range? Yeah. How would you make it work on the ground? It's very difficult. And I don't really understand or believe that someone like Rishi Sunak, who is has a first-class degree in PPE, who is a good economist, will possibly go down this path of price capping. I mean, I hope he doesn't, because I think that's a political decision and not an economic one.
Well, it's communism light, and we've seen the failure of rent controls in cities like New York, which Mayor Khan, of course, wants in London. So I think your words are wise. But let's move on now to the issue of political discourse, because Labour MP Charlotte Nichols has praised the festival chant F the Tories on Twitter. She was at a concert and there were people literally chanting that. This is a family show, as you know, apart from when I read emails. And that's what was being chanted. F the Tories, F the Tories. She tweeted, I love to see it. And this was at the Neighbourhood Weekender event. So is it acceptable to shout F the Tories? What do you think, Hilary Freeman?
Yes, it's acceptable to shout it.
Free speech.
Free speech, yeah. It's acceptable to shout whatever you want to shout. I think it's lost its power. I think that word means nothing now. And I think I actually looked this up before, how many people have shouted that phrase.
Right.
And it's everybody from Jon Snow, the
Channel 4 news presenter.
To the band
Not as good as John Sargent, by the way.
Of course. To the band Wet Leg, to, I think you pronounce it Lucian Loviscount. I don't know how you pronounce it. But it's just, you put that phrase in and it doesn't mean anything. It's lost its power. And I think, I honestly don't it's trying to be cool, I think.
Well, I'm a free speech absolutist. Shout whatever you like, absolutely. Yeah. I can't bear this notion of hate speech because that's so subjective. However, a member of Parliament... Well, yeah, if you incite, let's say, the breaking of the law, racism, absolutely not. But it's the Labour MP who praises this. But these will be the same MPs who talk about trolling online and how unsafe it is to be a member of Parliament these days.
Well, yes, I don't think that an MP should be praising this. I think that they have to... They've got to think about what is right rather than what makes them look popular. And I think quite often that seems to go by the wayside now.
Yeah, Linda, you seem vexed on this one.
I think everyone's got to get away from this kind of inflammatory speech. It isn't helping anyone at all. What we'd really like to hear about is some kind of observation or an insight or lift the lid.
Well, in the old days, we used to shout, "I disagree with you," didn't we?
Yeah.
You're wrong. Your arguments.
Yeah. Or try forming an argument. How about that? Isn't that a novel idea? Try forming an argument.
John, this is a worry, isn't it? The demonisation of any political group.
Yes, I just think it's lazy and it's pointless in terms of political discussion. And when you're young, it's wonderful to have someone, particularly if it's got an obscenity in it, because you just think, oh, that means I'm sort of grown up now. Because and also, I think what's interesting is the way that the person involved that we're talking about said how pleased she was and satisfied. Well, that's pathetic. That's in a deep sense pathetic, isn't it? Because, of course, what you're really trying to do is not sort of, if we didn't have the Tories there, we could do this, that and the other. Wouldn't it be so much better if they could move on to that part of the argument instead of just simply emoting? But it's one of the problems of, frankly, social media and all the rest of it. People think they should shout out something which will carry emotional force, which they then regard as being an argument. That's what's so creepy.
Listen, stop being so balanced. This is GB News.
You've been practising that. Right. John's going to come on, and I'm going to make sure he's not allowed to be sensible.
That's exactly right.
He's got to blurt out something stupid.
I want you to tell me what you really think, which you couldn't do 3 or 4 decades at the Beeb. Is this a problem of the left? We know the right have issues, OK? But is this kind of toxic language unique to the left, and was it ever thus?
Oh, no. What about...
Are you sure?
Someone used the same word. He was called Boris Johnson. He was Prime Minister, if you remember. And he used the same word about business. Do you remember?
True.
F business.
Fair point.
So, I think we've got you there. So just...
He's got me over a barrel. You've got to get up pretty early in the morning to beat John Sargent. Last but not least for this section, a shopping centre in Bromley banned children under the age of 16 without an adult. That's right. No under 16s without an adult. After a fight broke out a few months ago, it was requested that children should be accompanied by a parent or guardian, especially those troublesome teenagers. So what do we think? Is this a good policy? And are young people a menace when you're out doing your shopping, John, in Waitrose?
No, they're not. They're obviously... No, the thing about it, we don't know much about the detail of this story because there's this shopping centre in Bromley where they're doing this, but it seems that all sorts of questions arise. What do the police think about all this? I know some of them were injured in the original riot. Why didn't they know more about it? Why aren't there more surveillance cameras? Why isn't there more law and order in Bromley? Bromley isn't some strange, sort of weird part of the world, disadvantaged in every term. No, it's not.
It's not Calcutta.
So you just feel, wait a moment, we're talking about our old friend incompetence, aren't we? We're talking about our old friend incompetence, the people running the place,
or
who don't seem to be able to control it.
The cops maybe not doing their job. But,
maybe they are, but they should be in touch with them. I mean, everyone in Bromley should think this is actually quite a comment on us, not whether it's a good idea. It's obviously a daft idea you're over 16,
I've got older
you have a parent.
Yeah, I've got older viewers and listeners who feel quite threatened by teenagers when they go out, Hilary.
Well, the problem is teenagers haven't got anywhere else to go anymore, have they? They've closed down the youth clubs, there's no playing fields, there's no sports clubs, everything's gone. So what are they supposed to do? They hang around shopping centres.
And I think I had this discussion with Lars, my co-podcast at the
On your brilliant podcast.
And actually, I think more community police officers could help matters, and they're not conventional policemen, and they have a less adversarial relationship with the public. But that's what you want to put in.
That's a great shout. My kids go to a very good local state comprehensive, and there are cops at Sainsbury's, and it's a good thing because there are a bunch of little scrotes in that school. Let me tell you, especially the little Dolans. You can imagine, can't you?
It's a terrifying
thought. If you
thought.
stop kids going to shopping, and when I was a teenager, going shopping with my friends was one of our, favourite things to do. If you stop them and going into retail outlets, that's just going to drive them more to the internet, and then there are going to be no shops
Which
left.
is also, they're the customers of tomorrow,
Exactly.
Yes. So there's a limit to how much, a marketplace should be fine as long as you're not doing anything, as long as you're being quiet, as long as you've got your parent with you. I mean, it's an appalling idea.
Well, what do you folks think? Do you disagree with what John has had to say there? Mark at gbnews.uk. Do you feel threatened by teenagers when you go shopping? Would you like adults accompanying them? Looking forward to this now. Coming up next, my Mark Meets guest is... Do settle down. My Mark Meets guest, one of the most fearless and principled politicians in the country, the Brexit-supporting Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood in West Yorkshire, Andrea Jenkins, dropping some truth bombs next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Some great emails coming in, Mark at gbnews.com. But first, it's time for Mark Meets. Now, this evening, we're going to meet one of the most principled and fearless politicians in the country, the Brexit-supporting Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood in West Yorkshire, Andrea Jenkins. And Andrea, it's been quite the journey, leaving school at 16, getting a job at Greggs, but eventually achieving a highly successful parliamentary career. How did your upbringing shape the person you are today and the values you hold?
Thank you, Mark. It's good to be here this evening. I'm very lucky. I had an amazing mum and dad. I mean, my dad was a lorry driver. He was, one of 8 children who shared a bedroom. They had nothing. And then he set his own business up. And it was amazing. He used to say, it doesn't matter where you come from in life, it's what you do in life that matters. And both my sisters are quite strong characters as well. And he used to say, dream big and dare to fail. So I'm very lucky having that kind of upbringing. I had quite a quirky upbringing. I mean, when my dad's business went bust, we lived in a council house for about 6 years, and he ended up buying this field in the 80s for £200, bought a horse from the local gypsy camp. So we had a horse while living in a council house. So it was, and then he got back on his feet again. So I've seen both sides of life, really.
Were your family Conservatives, or were you the first, Andrea?
No, there was definitely Conservative. I mean, my sister, my oldest sister, who's 10 and a half years older, she got into politics far more quicker than I did. I sort of fell into politics when I lost my dad, really, and decided to stand for an MP in 2011 when we lost my dad.
Well, you've had a meteoric rise. We're going to talk about the serious politics in just a moment. But first, I've got to ask you about Miss UK. Tell me more.
Oh, God. I mean,
I'm not surprised.
Oh, no, God, I'm a bit more chubbier now. I had an amazing dad. I mean, I'll just tell you a funny story, actually. My dad was so proud, and when I recorded my album back in, 2007, I think it was, it turned up at Andrew Lloyd Webber's house at 5 a.m, knocked on the door at 6 a.m, and gave it to the butler, and the butler invited him in. He was really sort of like he was an amazing, proud dad. When I was younger, he sent my picture into the beauty pageant, and it was, how was it? It was interesting. I mean, I don't mind stuff like that. I think whatever makes people happy. But it was a bit of fun. But I didn't take it seriously. I mean, there's people there who was taking it really seriously in the way they walked, and I better not go out there. The judges might see me. I want to make an entrance, and I need the loo. Let's just go to the loo. So it was interesting. Yeah, it's a different side of life, that's all.
Well, listen, you made it to the final, and clearly you decided to do work that was a bit more substantial than that. You wanted to change the world, so you entered politics. It's an amazing story. You went back to education in your late 30s via the Open University and the University of Lincoln. The rest is history. You're in the Commons now. So let's talk about politics. Was it a mistake getting rid of Boris Johnson, do you think?
I think so, definitely. And I think that, he was democratically elected, and when it should have been the electorate kicking him out. I mean, I don't want to appear to be a hypocrite here because of, the Theresa May years, but the fact was, the country was an international embarrassment then. We couldn't get any legislation through, and I think that was different times. We had a majority, you won as a massive majority, and I really genuinely think there's an orchestrated campaign for anybody who's centre-right. We've seen it in TV, haven't we, as well? We've seen what's been going on in ITV, and it's, thank God for, programmes and GBNews shows, etc. But yeah, I think it was wrong. 1,000,000%. And when Liz Truss came along, I thought, wow, it's the first time in years we've actually got some Conservative policies. That's why I backed her as well.
As the economy faces further challenges, was Liz Truss proved right all along about lowering taxes and boosting growth?
I think she was, definitely. I was messaging her last night, and I think she was. But as I've said publicly before, I think the issue is that in the party, we've got more the One Nation Conservatives than we have the centre-right, Thatcherite Conservatives, as in MP-wise. And they got the leader they wanted with Rishi, but the activists, they wanted Boris. So it's misaligned.
As I said, you're one of the most principled politicians in the country. You backed Brexit. You are a conviction politician. So much so that you famously flipped the middle finger to a protester a while back. What happened?
Yeah. I actually saw that Steve Bray, Mark, you know, that arse, who's the Remainer guy. And he's been hounding me. And you've got children, and I'm sure you're a protective dad. I'm a protective mum. I've got a little 6-year-old. Even when my little one was in his pram, he'd be there with his big megaphone shouting. And there was all there shouting, "Bye, bye, Boris." And I thought, do you know, you guys have got what you want now. And he had the big megaphone and the music playing, "Bye, bye, Boris." And I thought, sod you. I'd had enough of it. Yeah, and simple as that.
Who could blame you? I think people don't realise the amount of abuse that politicians get as they go about their daily business. I've got a really tricky question for you, and you might find it quite difficult to answer. So are you ready? Are you braced?
Go on then, yes.
Can a woman have a penis?
Oh, sorry, I misheard that.
Can a woman have a penis?
Of course not. No, not in a million years. No. There's two biological sexes. That's the way I was brought up, and that's the fact of the matter.
What do you think of politicians, Andrea, that cannot answer that question, especially people like Keir Starmer, who's actually married to a woman?
And clearly had children with a woman as well. Yeah. I think that he is actually, he don't speak the truth, is pandering, and just speak the truth, be honest.
Of course, Keir Starmer would argue that he simply wants to include all members of society. Listen, before you go, we could talk for hours. Look forward to your next appearance on the show. But what's next for you? Would you like to re-enter sort of top-level government? You've been a PPS and you've had various positions. Would you like to have your hand on the tiller again?
No, not in a million years, Mark. I mean, I was a PPS. I was a whip for nearly a year. Which he couldn't speak then, you know, in media. And then I was a minister for nearly 4 months. But it was actually, this is a sad story, it was losing my mum last year. And my sister went in a coma at the same time. And she got paralysed. And then I thought to myself, you know,
you decided you will be a politician that can't be edited. Andrea Jenkins, thank you so much. Next up, my take at 10.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, ITV are expected to axe this morning by the autumn. This sorry drama is one of their own making. 2 weeks ago, I broke the internet with my extraordinary offer to step in and rescue the show. After 10, find out whether that offer still stands. As Keir Starmer says he has a plan to tackle the Channel migrant crisis, can Labour stop the boats? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable Anne Widdecombe. And Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of the papers with tomorrow's front pages from exactly 10:30 sharp. So, will I be taking over this morning? Find out after the headlines with Rory Smith.
Thank you very much, Mark. We'll stay with the subject. ITV says this morning will air as normal tomorrow, following reports the show could be axed. But staff members say executives need to prove they're properly addressing the issue of Philip Schofield's affair with a young employee. Sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save the programme. We asked some viewers their opinions.
It's not really for us to judge someone. I mean, what he did, I mean, if it's true that this young chap was 18, it's nothing to do with us. I think he should speak to his family.
I will say that I think perhaps the show needs fresh people on. I think that the show really relied on the chemistry that Holly and Phil had.
For me, I'm less keen to watching the programs with them. As they split, I'm all right, and I think that Holly's gonna get the career even bigger now, you know.
I like Phil and Holly, so I'm very sad to see them go because I love them both. So it's a pity, really. And I was shocked to hear about Phil, because I didn't think he'd do anything like that, be so deceitful.
In Turkey, President Erdogan has won the presidential election to take his rule into a third decade. Erdogan received just over 52% of the vote, with Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu securing nearly 48%. His rival is refusing to admit defeat, calling it an unfair election. Well, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has sent his congratulations, saying he looks forward to continuing a strong collaboration between the UK and Turkey. A man has been charged with the murder of a 17-year-old boy in Sheffield. Mohammed Iqbal was stabbed to death in the Crokes area on Thursday and later died in hospital. 29-year-old Peshawar Ghafoor from the city will appear in court tomorrow charged with his murder. Well, earlier today, a 33-year-old man was also arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. The government is launching an ad campaign to stop people from crossing the channel. The advert, set to be circulated in Albania next week, will warn people they face being detained and removed if they make the journey. Critics have already branded it as pointless, saying it won't deter them. Well, a record number of people made the crossing in small boats last year, and more than 6,000 have been intercepted so far this year. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News. Now though, back to Mark.
Thanks, Ryan. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. As Keir Starmer says he has a plan to tackle the Channel migrant crisis, can Labour stop the boats? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, Anne Widdecombe. And Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages from exactly 10:30 sharp. And we're expecting more headlines about Philip Schofield and ITV. Plus, we'll have tonight's headline heroes and back page zeros. Big stories, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's kick off with my take at 10. They've only got themselves to blame. The Sunday Mirror newspaper report that ITV are considering axing this morning, all as a result of their disastrous handling of a scandal that was the worst kept secret since Elton John's hair loss. They are now on the verge of losing one of the most valuable franchises in the history of British television. Do you remember when This Morning started with the brilliant Richard and Judy? How great was that show, live from Liverpool, in touch with its audience, down to earth, with dear old Judy regularly getting cheesed off by her husband's overzealous interruptions? They had great chemistry because they were married. They weren't pretending to like each other like some of the others. Since then, This Morning has reflected the smug, fake, vomit-inducing world of establishment media. This reached its nadir with Holly and Phil, who went to awards ceremonies together and turned up to present the show the next day still drunk and merry. What a wonderful life. They went on holiday together, dinner parties, Holly and Phil, besties for life. Of course, plenty of TV is fake. Holly and Phil are not unique. But it was around the time Phil had his emergency announcement of being gay that things took a darker hue. That was the point at which you can only conclude the audience were probably being lied to about what kind of guy Schofield actually was. Surely that's the point where Holly Willoughby puts her hand up, isn't it, and says, I don't like this. Sorry, folks, something's not right. I'm out of here, as others did. Instead, fueled by more ambition than Napoleon, the highly enterprising Willoughby keeps the band together in order to prop up not just the show, but also her growing media and commercial empire. I'm sorry, folks, she's very talented, but the halo has slipped for Little Miss Perfect. Now, ITV have been guilty of some colossal misjudgments of late, but none more so than their insane decision not to take me up on my extraordinary offer to rescue This Morning as an act of patriotic duty. Here is the original Take at 10, 2 weeks ago, which, not uncharacteristically for this show, broke the internet. Take a listen. So the offer stands. I am willing to present This Morning with my fee going to charity Help for Heroes. This is not a drill. The offer is a firm one. Oh, and if I do have to use Schofield's dressing room, make sure it's been disinfected first. ITV, it's over to you. Well, it didn't happen. More fool them. They've lost thousands of viewers. Let me tell you that ratings are not a problem on this show. Can I tell you that I think for the first time ever, we beat BBC News, the flagship news channel of this country, at 10 o'clock last night. Well done to my team and you, my amazing viewers and listeners. So it didn't happen. I was not the presenter of This Morning 2 weeks ago. Instead, they put Holly and Phil back on, not even acknowledging this huge story and therefore taking their viewers for idiots. This Morning is hanging by a thread. and I'd like to get it back to where it once was, in the great days of Richard and Judy. So I've cleared this with the bosses here, and the offer still stands. I will temporarily host the show just to get it back on its feet, whilst, of course, maintaining my duties here at GB News. I will need a co-presenter, obviously, and it's a deal breaker who I get. Who do you think should be my co-host on this morning? It can't be anyone fake or pathetic. Here are the people I would consider doing the show with. Nana Acquia. What a talent, what a broadcaster, what a personality. Michelle Dewberry. Beautiful, smart, clever, on the right side of every argument. Bev Turner. Feisty, brain box, talented, drop dead gorgeous. Yes, yes, yes. Dan Wootton. Imagine me and Dan on this morning. And let's be honest, Dan belongs back at ITV, his home for 10 years. I'd also present the show with Nigel Farage. How great would that be? No nonsense from Nigel. I'd love to hear Nigel talk about swimsuits or pasta recipes. Time to get that beach body ready. And if it comes to it, and they want somebody a bit more woke, after all, it is ITV, I would do it with Lineker. That's right, folks. I would be willing to work with Gary Lineker. Sparks will fly, and I think you'll agree it would be unmissable telly. And he's got Schofield's white hair, so it won't be such a shock to the system. In the end, whatever happens, I suspect this morning is not long for this world. ITV is about to lose its cash cow because of their bull. It's an utter disaster. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. I'll get to your brilliant emails shortly, but reacting to my take at 10, my top pundits, author and agony aunt Hilary Freeman, TV News legend John Sargent, and journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee. John Sargent, your reaction to my bold offer to ITV?
It's very generous of you. The way you do it, though, with such, I don't know, modesty and care.
John, listen.
I was in tears. I mean, it wouldn't have been shown, but I was overcome.
Listen, John, don't be too facetious, because there might be a gig in it for you. I need a weatherman.
I wouldn't be any good as a weatherman.
Well, actually, do you know what I would do, John? Do you know what I would do? I would bring you back as the chief political correspondent of This Morning, because I've got to tell you, there's no journalistic figure that I can think of in the last 4 decades whose opinion and judgment I trusted more than when you were in front of Downing Street, Margaret Thatcher, John Major and beyond. What a journalist you are, and it's always a thrill to have you on the show. Another great journalist is Linda Jubilee. Your reaction to This Morning, whether it's going to last, should they axe it? What's your overview, Linda?
I think they will axe it, and I think they will act quite quickly now. Because the problem was they should have acted more quickly before. I definitely think that Holly Willoughby knew about it all a lot earlier than she claims to have. And I think that the young man was behind Philip Schofield's announcement of being gay and coming out. I think that he knew... Well, I know that several newspapers had that story, and what he was doing was just trying to get ahead of the story and make the announcement and manage the news a little bit. But certainly it had been going on for some time. The question is, how old was the young boy when they first encountered each other?
Yes, and of course that is the million-dollar question. Hilary Freeman, your reaction to this whole debacle? I believe it's a crisis of ITV's making. Yes, it looks like Schofield's behaviour was inappropriate, but it seems like a management failure too, and possibly a cultural one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this story has been known about in media circles for literally years. So everybody at ITV knew about this. I think Holly did know, but I actually think that she genuinely believed Philip when he said that it wasn't true. I think it's unfair to castigate her for trusting her friend. But yeah, I think heads are going to roll at ITV. I think it's a higher level that has to take responsibility for this.
Yeah, I mean, Linda, let's talk about Holly Willoughby. Has the halo slipped for Little Miss Perfect?
Yes, I think she certainly now has, to use another analogy, feet of clay. She was in a pretty unassailable position. So it's rather surprising that things degenerated to this extent. But I think now is the time for a break. just for her, just to let things ease off a little bit. I don't think she can punch her way through this one. I think she has to take a break, take stock, but I don't think her career's over in the way that Philip Schofield's clearly is.
Yes. Now, John Sargent, we've seen the impact on Fox News' ratings in the States, losing Tucker Carlson. I think it was 3 million viewers a night he had. They're down to 1 million now. And here's the problem. If you lose a hit show like This Morning, it doesn't just affect that slot. It can affect the lead-in beforehand and the show afterwards.
Sure, that's it. It's a very important bridging moment in the schedule. That's certainly true. I would have thought what they do is they certainly say it's the end of This Morning, and then they bring back a show which is to do exactly the same thing. So they might have 3 presenters instead of 2, they might have 1, but it's got to do the same job.
Brilliant idea.
The actual job description of the programme will not alter, but the name of the programme must go as soon as possible, and they must say that era is over.
I think you're most certainly right. I think they just call it Good Morning and they pretend like nothing happened. I'm sure that would work. John Sargent, Hilary Freeman and the wonderful Linda Jubilee are back at 10:30 sharp with the papers. Greg's in charge tonight, so it will be 10:30. He knows how to crack the whip. So look, folks, lots more to come. Next up, as Keir Starmer says he has a plan to tackle the Channel migrant crisis, can Labour stop the boats? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable, the unmissable, Anne Widdecombe.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Well, should I take over this morning as it's a national emergency. My fee would go to Help for Heroes. I would stay at GB News to fulfil my duties. Well, many of you think I should. Jill said you'd be great with Nana on this morning. Linda says, hi, Mark, would love to see you on the show. With Kinsey Schofield, you're regular on a Saturday, a match made in heaven. Tony says, you're still ranting about This Morning and Schofield. We don't care, says Tony. For goodness sake, give it a rest. You're getting as bad as the BBC. Tony, please don't insult me. How about this from Barry? I think there should be a threesome to replace This Morning. Mark, Dan and Bev. Ratings would skyrocket. And as for Holly, says Barry, she must have known more of this scandal and she needs to be replaced from the ITV slot. And Tim, what exactly is Holly Willoughby talented at? Besides inane grinning, Olympic cleavage displaying and being a simpering airhead, I'm puzzled, says Tim. Can I just say your emails are getting more poetic by the day. It's time now, speaking of poetic, for tonight's Newsmaker, in which we speak to a fearless commentator on the big stories of the day. And as always on a Sunday, I'm delighted to welcome former government minister, best-selling author and television personality Anne Widdecombe. As some now predict that illegal crossings in the Channel could reach over 80,000 this year, Sir Keir Starmer has said he has a plan to solve this crisis, including tackling the backlog of asylum applications, cooperating with France and dealing with people traffickers at source. So if he becomes Prime Minister, will it work? Can Labour stop the boats? Anne, what's your view?
Well, you know, a central point is that he wants greater European cooperation. Well, these boats are coming from one place, they're coming from France. We've tried the cooperation route. We've given France a load of money, a shed load of money. Not once, not twice, 3 times have we given France money to help us sort the mess out. And 3 times have they taken the money and delivered absolutely zilch. So, you know, forget that, Keir. It's been tried. You know, that's nothing new. It's been tried and it's failed. Then he says he's going to hurry up the asylum claims. Great, I'm all for that. But what happens when at the end of an asylum claim he's going to say no? How is he going to send those people back? Has he got agreements like we've got with Albania at the moment? What's he going to do? He doesn't tell us. It's all froth. It's complete froth. It's not even smoke and mirrors because that's clever and this isn't even clever.
However, Keir Starmer argues that he would have a more constructive relationship with France and the European Union, and that's what would tackle the crisis.
I've no doubt that he would seek closer relationships, that he would give up what very little independence we got as a result of Brexit. I've no doubt about that. I've no doubt that he'll align with Europe rather than becoming competitive with it. But if he thinks that that is going to move Europe into suddenly cooperating over the small boats, then he's got another thing coming because their record is zilch. And the idea that if you just go and smile and be nice to them, that can achieve what money wouldn't achieve, I don't agree. I just don't see it happening.
And what do you make of this new government video dissuading Albanians from coming to the UK?
Well, it's a good message. And I'm all for trying to dissuade people. I've said deterrence is what makes it. But we have to do something more than just return a few hundred Albanian asylum seekers or illegal migrants. We've got to actually return a few thousand. And then that's a deterrent. That's a deterrent. So I'm all for sending the message, but the thing that will convince people is not the words on posters. It's the action that we're taking that they hear about that makes them decide whether they want to pay all that money to human trafficking agents or not.
I know you're not his biggest cheerleader, but pretty smart of Rishi Sunak to stand by his Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, amid that speeding non-story.
Well, what was all the fuss about? She got a speeding ticket. She was offered a speeding awareness course. She realised that she would have to do it with a lot of other people. She asked a question. That's all she did. She didn't try to enforce it. She asked a question, which is there any way of doing this privately? I would have asked exactly the same question. The answer she got was, we don't know and we're not going to investigate because we're civil servants. So then she asked her own office and then she decided, no, there wasn't any way of doing it privately, so she'd take the points. She asked a question. You know, what is wrong with asking a question? It's not as if she tried to fiddle the system.
Well, I've got to say, I'd be very entertained doing a speed awareness course with Anne Widdecombe. That would be a very diverting experience. Anne, briefly, if you can, we haven't spoken since the official statistics came out that over 600,000 people entered the country legally in the last year. There are those arguing it's good for the economy, that we need the cheap labour and that we need the young population. What's your view of these figures and the scale of them?
Well, they're far too high, coming from a government that has persistently promised to get the numbers down. You know, David Cameron, it was going to be under 250,000. We've had all these promises, tens of thousands even we got down to at one point, and yet nothing has been delivered. So I think it's time to stop looking just at the raw figures and start looking at what these categories are. You know, some are students, some are skilled workers. What sort of skills? High-level skills, low-level skills that we should expect our own people on the dole to do. You know, we need to actually look now at the categories.
Indeed so. Anne, before you go, you are always very forthright, very articulate, but you're always exquisitely tailored. And I've got great news about a great British company headquartered in the UK that pays its taxes here, and it's Marks & Spencer. Marks & Spencer have defied the critics and are enjoying record profits. So has the public fallen back in love with M&S? Do you go to M&S, Anne?
Well, I used to go to M&S a very great deal because I wanted something that was reasonable quality, but also reasonable price. And that's quite a difficult combination. But then gradually I used to go into M&S, and instead of being as it used to be, it's divided up into concessions just like any department store, was trying to be something which it's not. Now, I think Marks & Spencer's being what everybody expects Marks & Spencer's to be, which isn't another Harrods. It's a place where you get good value, you get good quality for that value, and you can see immediately where to go and what it is you want and where it's displayed. I walked round, I mean, admittedly it was Oxford Street, which is, you know, one of the enormous ones, but I walked round for ages trying to find something that I knew exactly what I wanted, but I couldn't find where it was.
Yeah. That's always the problem. And we know where to find you every Sunday night here on Mark Dolan Tonight. Always a thrill. We'll catch you in a week's time. Have a great week. My thanks to Anne Widdecombe. Have you fallen back in love with M&S? I'm very proud of our great British brands, you know. It's not just M&S. Next. What a great business. They pretty much invented the idea of next day delivery. What about Primark? Great value. Happy days. John Lewis. There are plenty of good shops out there. Try not to give all your money to Amazon, right? Headquartered somewhere obscure in Europe and not paying as much tax as they blinking well should. So, folks, lots more to come. We've got the papers next with full pundit reaction and tonight's front page heroes and back page zeros. Lots to come. See you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Britain's news.
Welcome back to the show. Look, the emails are coming in thick and fast. Have you fallen back in love with M&S? Their profits are through the roof. Well, not Gibson, who says Marks and Spencer's are a disgrace to mankind. They refuse to serve you and send you to self-serve. They are a disgraceful shop. Not enjoying the self-service there. On ITV, and whether they should act this morning, ITV needs to be investigated, says Kyle. There are people who knew what was going on, and the young man was a boy of 15 when Philip met him. We do know that story has been corroborated by the Mail on Sunday and Katie Hind. Why isn't there an investigation into that? Being a person in a position of power in UK law states relations with under 18s or over 16 is illegal. OK. Look, let's get back to the results now of our Twitter poll. We've been asking you, do you think that Labour would stop the boats? The results are in. They are damning for Sir Keir Starmer, I've got to say. 94% say no, 6% say yes. I'll get reaction from my top pundits next. It is time now for this. OK, we've got tomorrow's front pages, as always, at 10:30 every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. The Independent: White House: if UK won't give asylum to Afghan war hero, we will look into it. That's an ongoing campaign from The Independent that no one's taking much notice of. The I newspaper: supermarket bosses hit back at PM's plan to cap food prices, something I debated with my pundits earlier in the show. Met Police to stop going to mental health call-outs, say The Guardian. And Erdogan retains hold on Turkey in election win. Daily Express: supermarkets warn price cap will not reduce food bills. And Kylie at 55, birthday girl still in the fast lane. Also in the Express, Holly vows to stay as ITV fights to save This Morning. And in football, good news to my brilliant viewers and listeners in Merseyside, or at least half of it, the blue half. Everton survive on day of drama. I've got to say, though, I'm gutted for Leeds going down, partly because it's a beautiful city, and secondly, my good friend Sam Allardyce is the manager. Financial Times: Republican chiefs try to quell revolt with debt default deadline looming. This is the extraordinary debt ceiling in the United States, which is just trillions of dollars, which has got to be a concern for global economic security. The Daily Mail now: TV doctor hits out at toxic This Morning. ITV crisis deepens as Dr. Ranj says the show had a culture of bullying. And Schofield's lover denies that bosses quizzed him over their affair. Are we going to hear from this young man? That's got to be the million-dollar question, one I'll be putting to my pundits shortly. And last but not least for now, Daily Star: unusually serious headline from the Star. This Morning crisis: Dr. Ranj blasts bully culture at ITV, fired because he tried to blow the whistle, something my good friend and colleague Dan Wootton says happened to him. Effectively, not fired, but an ultimatum that either he, swallows the nonsense or he takes the paycheck. And Dan, being a man of honour, said, I'm out of here. Well, that's what people with principles look like. Let me tell you, Dan Wootton back tomorrow at 9. Let's get reaction to tomorrow's front pages with agony aunt and author Hilary Freeman, TV news legend John Sargent, and journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee, star of a top political podcast, which is called Common Sense.
Politics.
Common Sense Politics, which you do with a fantastic chap who's a regular on my Dial Dolan slot. Give it a listen. We need a bit of common sense in this country, don't we? Obviously, lots of headlines about the supermarket price cap, which you're not having, not because, Linda, you think that there isn't a moral case for it. You just don't think it works in practical terms.
Well, it's not just practical terms. I think there are logistical difficulties with it. For example, it talks about dropping the price of milk. That's already dropped quite substantially. So I don't think people are necessarily paying attention to where there have already been falls. I do appreciate that people are really, really suffering. I feel the pinch when I go to the supermarket now. So it's really serious. It's not just about practicalities. It's about economics. It's about whether actually putting a price cap on destroys free market economics, supply and demand, and actually builds problems for the future in terms of job losses, in terms of reducing margins for smaller supermarkets.
But if the government are helping people with their energy bills, which I think we can agree was the right thing to do, and businesses, why wouldn't you do that with bread, milk and eggs, especially when kids are involved?
Because I am saying that it will not make a difference to inflation, ultimately.
Do you think it would feed inflation?
It might do, but there will be these other problems with reduced margins for smaller supermarkets, lack of investment, it'll harm competitiveness.
And you know what Tesco and Aldi will do? They'll just put the price of everything else up, won't they? They'll get their money somehow, John, because that's how businesses work.
Well, that's how they work. But I think the other strange thing about this is that the market, certainly for milk and for bread, they're fairly controlled anyway in terms of these agreements between the farmers and the supermarkets. So when you just feel that this is a sort of band-aid policy where you try and sort of stop this going on, whereas it'd be so much more sensible, I think, to say, look, let's invest in British production of food.
Absolutely.
Because, and let's invest in it, let's make sure there are more farmers producing more goods, and this, frankly, well, it's almost the right time of year, but it's late, isn't it? In terms of making sure...
So right, and that should be the Brexit bonus, is that we produce more of our own goods.
Yeah, but we've got no one to pick it, have we?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we have, 5 million working-age adults not active in the economy at the moment.
Do you want to go and pick fruit?
Well, if I had to. Yeah. I've done some odd jobs in the past.
I've picked fruit when I was a kid. We loved it. We were given £1 a day.
That's pretty good money.
Depending on how many plums or whatever we'd picked. But it was fun. We loved that. We went out there with my mother, 3 children, my mother, would arrive in a little car and we'd pick fruit all day. And we were rich, really rich after that.
Where was this, by the way?
Near Oxford.
Nice.
Yeah.
Lovely. But the issue is, though, that the messaging of this is surprising from a Conservative Prime Minister, isn't it? The idea of price control.
It smacks of
desperation. Not very on brand, is it?
Well, it smacks of desperation and you just don't feel they'll follow through. They're saying it would be entirely voluntary. Well, now, unless you were giving the supermarket something, and a lot, why would they mess up with their own plans and what they were meant to be doing? And also, they're very interested in loss leaders in supermarkets. So if people come in and they see something as cheap, and they then think, oh, this is the supermarket I would like to go to. Yeah. That's part of their strategy. That's the age-old marketing strategy of supermarkets. But they keep a lot of that secret, but they want to go on doing it themselves, thank you very much, not having the government involved, which makes it more complicated and more bureaucratic.
Greg, if you don't mind, would you get that text poll up, the Labour text poll about Stop the Boats? Because I thought, John Sargent, that this was a pretty damning poll result for the Leader of the Opposition. There are many people that watch this channel, that watch the show and listen to it on the radio, who are disgruntled former Labour voters who lent Boris Johnson their vote in 2019. But they don't look like they're going to go back to Labour in a hurry. Here's the text poll question, and we've got a massive response to this. Do you think Labour would stop the boats? And 93.9% of our viewers and listeners say no. This is going to be a problem for Keir Starmer in a year's time, isn't it?
Well, it's also, remember, that you're asking another question too, although you may not mean to, which are who are your voters? And the key point is that when people are asked that sort of question, which most people would doubt, you know, are you going to be able to stop the boats? Can it be done just like that? With Keir Starmer's record, is it unlikely? The true answer is it is unlikely. But the people who would normally, in answer to a poll like that, would be ardent Labour supporters who would just simply, knowing that it was a critical question, would reply, yes, he'll be able to do that. You know, and they'll use the word yes, but in your audience, they're much less likely to be fervent Labour supporters.
Well, you say that, but we've got so many viewers and listeners in the red wall seats who have been voting Labour for generations.
Sure, but they're now, by watching these programmes, they're not in the mood to say Keir Starmer right or wrong, we'll back him. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the 93% goes down to zero.
Do you think Stop the Boats is... Do you think illegal immigration is a red herring that's being overplayed?
No, it's got to be credible, though. What people won't do, as you see in the Turkish elections just now, the opposition leader, you may have heard this, said that 3 million Syrians should leave Turkey. Well, people thought, right, it's last minute, but won't that sway the vote in his direction? And it hasn't. We know that now. Today, it hasn't.
But, John, just to press the point, anyone watching or listening that's concerned about the levels of illegal and legal migration into this country surely won't vote Labour enthusiastically.
Well, it depends what happens between now and then, but they need to build up a policy that will seem credible, not just we agree with Stop the Boats or we're going to do something. No, they've got to have a proper, detailed policy.
Labour?
Yes, so that over time, over the 12 months, 18 months that is left, they can then go on saying, but we intend to do this and we intend to do that and so on. But then they might have a chance of making headway in this area, which is traditionally not their area.
But isn't that precisely the problem with Keir Starmer, is that he's coming out with these cut-and-paste sound bites, and that's all they are. Do we ever hear anything that underpins them? Do we hear the insights? Do we hear the data? Do we hear
And what if he changes his mind in a year's time, John?
Well, they can't do that. You see, once you're into they're effectively in the campaign now, whether they like it or not. This is the campaign's started already. So they've got to be in that campaigning mood, which means policy, reiteration of policy, repeating it over and over again so that people know what their policy is and why it differs from the Conservative policy and the Lib Dems. They've got a long way to go.
Yeah, Hillary, I mean, what goodies do you think Keir Starmer has up his sleeve? Because he's got a year now to demonstrate he should be our next Prime Minister. John's saying that there needs to be substance to back up his promise to stop the boats. But do you think he's sitting on a war chest of ideas?
I think that there probably are an awful lot of ideas that are being discussed that haven't come out yet. I think they're biding their time, waiting to announce them.
Don't peak too soon.
Yeah, don't peak too soon. And also, you know, wait for the government to screw it up again and to keep on making unpopular decisions.
I mean, is Stop the Boats being oversold by the Conservatives as the political silver bullet? I don't think it is, because I think people genuinely are concerned about it. But what's your view?
I mean, I think that we've actually got... I heard something on the radio the other day. Somebody was actually saying that we actually need more immigration because there's such a shortage of doctors and nurses. So I actually think that saying that immigration is the issue is actually not the case, and people are going to start realising that we do have a shortage of lots of people in things like the health service.
Yeah.
And that this just
People have a strong dislike, though, of illegal immigration.
That's right.
Else.
Controlled immigration is a different thing.
They hate the idea that people are jumping the queue and there are all sorts of able people who are filling in the forms properly and they're arriving on a boat. And that is a very big emotional feeling. And you might almost say it's got very little to do with immigration policy as such.
Yeah.
It's just real deep-seated anger and disturbance.
It's the optics of it, and it's human nature, isn't it, to be unsettled by folk arriving on boats, running for the hills, chucking their documents and phones into the water as they cross the channel. It's an unedifying spectacle, and it's not how a functioning country should work, is it? Without being in any way xenophobic.
I mean, you look at there is different categories, as you've rightly pointed out, John, of immigrants. The Afghans, for example, are evacuees.
Yeah.
They were taken airlifted off the tarmac.
Hong Kongers,
they're different too.
Yeah.
Ukrainians, different as well. But the resistance here is against illegal immigrants coming over on inflatable craft.
Interesting you should say
David
that.
Cameron put it well. He said people think that they're invading, that they're breaking into our country. Breaking into our country.
That's the perception.
I thought that was quite clever.
The case
Cameron
when
said that.
refugees have been treated in this country.
No,
Not necessarily. It's not.
That's not the case. No, that's not the case, because people, in fact, often for all sorts of reasons, certainly after the Second World War, all sorts of people came here, but perfectly legally, and lots of people come here legally. So it's not a matter of, they can't come in any other way except on the
15,000
boats.
Afghans came here
Tens
after
of
the fall of
thousands
Kabul.
of them, tens of thousands. And in the war, lots of people came, and lots of Jewish people came.
Yes, they had to be sponsored. There's a lot of mythology about how easy it was for them to come.
I'm not saying it was easy, but they came. Gosh, they came in enormous numbers. And certainly there's some of the top people.
But yeah.
Let's have an elaborate argument. Let's not go into.
A lot of them ended up being.
No, let's not go into this sort of. No, because the argument's always lost when we start comparing it with the Holocaust. It's just one of those arguments that are so big.
Sure, but
once you start introducing
personal family history.
Well, tell me.
I know. I'm sure.
Because you feel that perhaps Britain's historic generosity in terms of refugees is overstated slightly? Or?
Yeah, I think it's overstated. I think there's always been suspicion. I think that people have always found it difficult to come here. Before the Second World War, when the Second World War started, people had to get sponsorship in order to come here. They had to have paperwork. You couldn't just get on a boat and turn up. Boats were turned away, not just from this country, but from other countries as well. America, has a massive history.
Sure.
There's a brilliant documentary about it.
No, I've seen it.
And I think, we forget that a lot of these people arriving on boats are genuine, and I think that because we don't like looking at them in a way, we turn our anger on them.
No, it's horrendous conditions of the Holocaust. To repeat the arguments about it, it's very difficult to go back to the 30s and say it's like the 30s. That's all I'm saying. Be very careful. As Gary Lineker found out, once you're into that area, it's
sure.
like.
Well, it's
not like anything.
I'm not comparing the current situation to the 30s. What I'm saying is that...
You are. You're saying you remember that with your family history. You know what it's like with some people here who had to fill in forms in the 1930s. Once you're talking about the 1930s, you're talking about the lead up to the Holocaust. I'm sorry. You are.
We look back at sort of rose-tinted, this country so welcoming to
immigrants.
I'm not saying
that at all.
I don't think that's necessarily
Rose-tinted, I'm not. No. Rose-tinted, I'm not.
No, although he likes rosé, but that's another story. Listen, let's get to some more stories after the break. We've got the Times on its way, and also a pretty explosive headline about Holly Willoughby in tomorrow's Daily Mirror. That's coming up in 2 minutes' time. Plus, my pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. And I want to know yours. Mark at gbnews.com. See you shortly.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On illegal migration, Alan says, hi Mark, why can the government not send a message to those people wanting to come across on small boats that if they arrive without their identity, documents or passport, they would not qualify to even be considered for asylum? If they have the documents, they can apply. Well, I think the plan, Alan, is actually if you enter the country illegally, you will not receive asylum, full stop. But look, keep those emails coming, Mark, at gbnews.com. We've got a couple more headlines now. Let's have a look at the Times newspaper. And actually, they covered the migrant story. British police bid to stop migrants leaving Africa. Police from the National Crime Agency will help countries in North Africa to identify and break up people smuggling gangs in an attempt to stop an expected surge of hundreds of thousands of migrants trying to leave the continent for Europe this summer. Also, poor maternity care left us in danger, say 1 in 4 mothers. Deeply concerning NHS story there.
1 in 4.
And the Daily Mirror, an exclusive. It's that show again this morning. Holly, I'll be staying. This morning, Star vows to carry on if ITV bosses can save the show. OK, those are some of your front pages. Let's get reaction now from Hilary Freeman, John Sargent and Linda Jubilee, my top pundits tonight. And Hilary, Holly digs in.
Well, she thinks she's staying, but it's not really up to her. It's not her decision, is it? It's up to ITV. I think... I don't see how she can stay. And I think that she still has a career. I think that she can present other shows, but I think she probably needs to go and have a break for a few months and then come back and do something else. I think she can't... You know, whether or not This Morning continues, I don't think she can carry on presenting it.
Linda?
That's exactly what I think. She needs to take a break. She could come back. She could come back in another role. It's not... You know, she's blighted, but not permanently, I would say. It'll be interesting this week if the identity of the younger male colleague comes out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already out in certain areas.
Such as the whole of the internet.
Yeah. So I think we're that far from seeing the identity, and that will just give the whole thing, the whole story, another push. And then I think we will see Holly departing for an early summer holiday.
You've been in Fleet Street for a long, long time. You've seen a few kiss and tells. This would be the mother of all kiss and tell stories. If this young man decides to sell his story to the press, imagine the deal. TV show, exclusive interview on, well, let's hope GB News, but somewhere, a book deal, newspaper interviews, serialisation. He could make a fortune.
And I think he'll have to do that. Because John and I were talking a little bit earlier on, but I think he'll have to do that because I don't know what's going to be left of his career at ITV. I mean, someone with a really established career who was in an almost unassailable position might consider not selling their story, but I think he can be persuaded to do it because he can't possibly be in a senior position.
No. Well, that's right. He's an up-and-coming producer, I think. We can't name him. But listen, what do you know? Because you've got your ear to the ground. What do you think it is going to happen? Do you think there's more to come, for example? Do you think it's going to get worse for Schofield?
I think it could get worse, yeah. It just depends on the details that this young man reveals.
Right. Could some of those rumours that are circulating online, which at the moment we can only assume are downright lies, is there a potential that they could be verified and then that would really go nuclear?
Well, there's always if he talks and he goes on the record, there's always considerable potential for the whole thing to get a great deal worse. Yeah. I mean, how do you characterise... Say he was 15 when Schofield met him.
Which is what the Mail on Sunday's Katie Hind suggests.
Yeah, it's said to be 15, and that would mean you could map it out properly because he got to about 18 when he went to a job on ITV. He's actually an adult. Remember, Philip Schofield's comments are very carefully worded. You know, it was an on-off relationship. It was not unlawful or illegal. But there are really grey areas here about what went on with this boy when he was 15. What would constitute grooming, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, John. He described the relationship as unwise but not illegal. Probably a good description of you and Mary, but, you know, a whole different context.
You always mention Mary.
I had to get her in.
Mark knows.
I get £5 every time I mention her.
No, this is my wife, my beloved wife. No, the problem that he's got is that, as you say, you meet someone at 15, you don't suddenly sort of say, well, I won't talk to you until you're 18. I won't become friends with you until you're 18, because, I mean, it's the whole area seems to be extraordinarily difficult. And the moment the young man, if he does decide to talk, the whole thing then goes right up in the sky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the first question, because he'll be ghosted by somebody. Yeah. OK, tell me when you met Philip Schofield. What were the conditions like? When did you next see him? Then what happened?
Yeah.
And then when you did you see him, on your 18th birthday? You know, I mean, the whole
it's very
thing...
potentially incriminating. This lad, how much could he make? £500,000?
I don't know whether he'd want to, because that will tarnish his future career forever. He won't be taken seriously.
Katie Hind, who owns this story, she's nailed it at the Mail on Sunday. She said that she understands that he doesn't want to live a lie and that he doesn't want to toe the line in terms of Schofield. So I wonder whether he might speak out at some point.
I think he might do. I think that the really sad thing for everybody with this is that if this had come out when Philip came out as being gay, which is why he came out as being gay, I believe, then it probably could have. Philip might not have survived it, but it wouldn't have been such a big deal for This Morning.
OK.
I think it's because it's associated with what's happened with Philip's brother.
Sure.
It's really become much more a bigger story.
But the other thing to remember, Philip Schofield's already said on the record that relationship is over. So it means that, he may find it much harder to work with this young man, saying, are you going to say this, not say this, please don't say this, do say that. If the relationship is over, it's much more dangerous.
There's a storm brewing.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, let's go rapid fire now between all of you, your headline heroes and back page zeros. Hilary, who have you got?
For my hero, I've got Jesse Armstrong, who is the creator and writer of Succession, which ends tomorrow night.
Just brilliant. TV classic. Nearly as good as Mark Dolan tonight. John, briefly, if you can.
OK, Rob Edwards, the manager of Luton. Fantastic match yesterday, wasn't it? Really fantastic. And so they're in the Premier League. Fantastic story.
Fabulous
amazing
story.
match.
Boom.
Penalty shootout. Terrific.
Congratulations, Luton. Linda.
And I chose Laura Nuttall, the 23-year-old girl who died of a brain tumour about 6 days ago, who featured in the Sunday Times this morning. A real story of bravery and courage and
absolute hero. Only name your back page zeros. Who have you got for us?
Roger Waters.
Oh, yes, of course. Anti-Semitism scandal, John?
Novak Djokovic.
Oh, yes, OK.
But not being nice enough about the fact that Rafa Nadal is not taking part in the French Open.
A little bit rude. Linda, who have you got for me to...
Philip Schofield.
There you go. Can't imagine why. Thanks for your company. Headliners is next. I'm back on Friday at 8.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me